Good morning, and thank you for joining in today. I hope everybody's had a great week, and I hope you're having some fresh corn and fresh tomatoes and all of those good things that come out of the garden this season of our year. Our lesson will be session 6 from the quarterly, or if you follow in your Bible, it's going to come from Job chapter 40. Now, we have to agree that there have been times in each of our lives when we felt if someone had put us in charge, we would have and could have done a better job than the person who was actually making the decisions. If you go to a football game and you'll hear prime suspects of that all around you. So many coaches or players who aren't on the field, but they're making the calls. And if you read the fan comments online after sports, a team has lost a game, well, everybody knows they could have done a better job. If you listen to comments on worldly events and government officials, everybody knows what would be best. The only problem is nobody asked our opinion or put us in charge. Now, we may call unfair on some events or circumstances all around us, but the problem then is nobody said that everything had to be fair. In our lesson for today, we find that God is finally speaking to Job, and much of how God speaks is in response to the times when Job felt that he would have handled things much different if he had been the one in charge, and things would not have been so unfair and one sided if he could have explained his situation and given God a little piece of his mind. He still kept his faith in God, and he still felt that God could and would clear up his innocence if he could just have a face to face meeting so that he could confront God for all the suffering that he had endured. And Job wanted that opportunity, and God gave it to him, although it didn't go exactly as he had expected. Now, I don't like taking scriptures out of context in the Bible. A lot of times people will do that in order to make the Bible say what they want it to say. In other words, they'll take a scripture and take it out of context, and it condones what fits their own lifestyle, which may not be what God would have us to do. But in order for us to understand God's point of view in these speeches that we're going to read today in the lesson, I want to skip through several of the comments that Job made during his rebuttals with his friends. Now, please remember that Job did realize that God was the source of his many blessings, but he had a great cycle of emotions. He had overwhelming sadness, loneliness. Remember, everybody left him alone. His wife wouldn't even come about. His servants wouldn't answer when he called. He had to be sad. He had lost his family. He had lost everything. And at times he felt angry. He felt fear and he felt anxiety. But he always held to his faith in God. However, there were times if Job's losses hadn't been so devastating, if we couldn't read and see what he was going through, with some of the things that he said that I'm going to read today, we might think he was just having some good old pity parties. But his losses were near humanly unbearable. And without his forever faith, it could have led him into a deeper state of depression where there was no point of return, or to a permanent state of anger at God. So I'm going to skip through some verses, and they come from chapters 16 through 31. But it's at different intervals when Job was voicing his innermost thoughts. And it's a lot for you to have to sit and listen to. And I don't want to have to tell you every chapter and verse because that would take too long. But I hope you'll bear with me. I think without hearing how Job felt at times, then we might read this lesson for today and think, well, just wait a minute, God, you bragged on Job's righteousness to Satan, and then you let Satan work his evil on Job's life. So why is he being so harsh on Job? So here we go, and it's going to start in chapter 16, skipping about just some comments that Job made along the way. Surely, God, you have worn me out. You have devastated my entire household. You have shriveled me up. God assails me and tears me in his anger and gnashes his teeth at me. God has turned me over to the ungodly. All was well with me, but he shattered me. He seized me by the neck and crushed me. He has made me his target. Well, he's pretty upset with God. Know that God has wronged me and drawn his net around me. Though I call for help, there is no justice. He has blocked my way, so I cannot pass. His anger burns against me. He counts me among his enemies. He has alienated my family from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. Is my complaint directed to a human being? Why should I not be impatient? I guess he was thinking it was God and he can answer right away. Even today, my complaint is bitter. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Would he vigorously oppose me? No, he would not press charges against me. But he stands alone, and who can oppose him? He does whatever he pleases. He carries out his decree against me. As surely as God lives, who has denied me justice? The Almighty, who has made my life bitter. In his great power, God binds me like the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I am reduced to dust and ashes. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about in the storm. Is it not ruin for the wicked, disaster for those who do wrong? Does he not see my ways and count my every step? He felt like it was okay for sinners to be punished, but he was not one that should have been. Let God weigh me in honest scales. Was he accusing God of using dishonest scales? And he will know that I am blameless. Oh, that I had someone to hear me. I sign now my defense. To the Almighty, answer me. Let my accuser put his indictment in writing. Now, in the scriptures that I did not read, Job did list all of the great things that he had done in his life, the kindness and the faithfulness he had shown. But in these verses, we see a little bit of Job's thought processes when he was angry and depressed, and he's trying to find someone to take the blame for his miserable state, which brings us to the first scriptures for today, which will be chapter 40, verses 1 through 5. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer, yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. Chapters 38 and 39 listed a multitude of rhetorical questions that God was asking Job about the creation. And he was basically asking Job uh, where he was when the features of the universe were brought into existence. And just as some of those, and I've kind of put them all here so we can go over them quickly. What human could give an account of how the world was made? What human could find the source of the seas or explain how to control them? Had any human been to the realm of death and lived to tell about it? Does any human bring up the morning or control the precipitation? Does any human know the heavens or have dominion over all of the animals? And then in these verses of chapter 40, God challenged Job to list his credentials for being in position to correct God. He wondered about Job's intent in approaching the way that he did. Humans and Job were made in God's image, not the other way around. What gave Job or any other human the knowledge, the wisdom, the credentials for instructing God? No creature can fully understand God's ways or keep him from accomplishing his plan. When given the opportunity, Job had nothing that he could say. He said, I'll just put my hand over my mouth. I've spoken. In other words, it was almost like I've already said too much. He realized that all the matters of his experiences were beyond his understanding. In the previous chapters, Job had spoken out boldly, as I've read, you've heard the scriptures, thinking that he could set God straight. But when he got the chance, he realized just how unworthy he was. He was not qualified to argue with God, and his adamant arguments, even with his friends, when he proclaimed that God was not fair to him, were totally out of line. Now, it wasn't a sin for Job to question how God was ruling in his life unless he became adamant that God must justify his actions, and that he was almost to that point. We may have questions at times as well, but we can't demand answers for our circumstances. We have to remember that God is our creator who knows our beginning and our end. And we have to trust his wisdom to work out his purposes. After Job's response, God began to speak again in the next scriptures, which would be verses 6 through 9. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind and said, Gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? Hast thou an arm like God, or canst thou thunder with a voice like him? Now Job had admitted that he was very insignificant, but God launched into this second speech, and men of that time wore long outer garments. And when they needed to get in a rush or get involved in physical activity, they would pull up that long garment and tie it off. In other words, gird up the loin. So, and they did it so that it wouldn't hinder the activity. Their phrase of gird up his loins was some sort of synonymous with our saying roll up your sleeves, meaning there's some work to be done, or there's more to come, and it's not going to be easy. God was challenging Job to prepare for this second round of questions that were going to require him to do a little more soul searching than the ones before. Now, Job believed that sinners should suffer, but he didn't believe that he should, at least not to the extent that he had, and therefore God was not rendering a fair judgment. Not being fair or just was a pretty strong and bold accusation to make of God. And it would be bold of us today if we said, oh, that's just not fair that I have to endure this. Well, you know what? And sometimes we'll say, well, why me, or why my family? And we might need to stop and say, well, why not me? Why not my family? So now God asked Job if he really believed he was qualified to determine God's fairness. In chapters 38 and 39, God spoke specifically of all the animals that he had created, and to each kind of animal he had given special characteristics in order for them to be able to survive and to flourish. His provision and his compassion for all of the creatures that he had made was an indication of his justice. God's arm in the Old Testament was used as a metaphor to represent his power and strength. So he asked Job if he had such an arm as that for the protection of all he had created. And God's voice reverberated like thunder and was representative of a great majesty. And as a matter of fact, right now he was communicating with Job through a whirlwind. And he asked, could Job match the sound of God's voice, the one that evoked power and respect? And of course, the answers were no. Job was realizing that he had made some claims about things that were far beyond what he was able to comprehend, and he certainly couldn't accomplish. In the last scriptures for today, then God listed some things that if Job could do, if Job could do these things, then he could be elevated and treated as equal to God. So I'm going to read verses 10 through 14. Deck thyself now with majesty and excellency, and array thyself with glory and beauty. Cast abroad the rage of thy wrath, and behold every one that is proud, and abase him. Look on every one that is proud, and bring him low, and tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together, and bind their faces in secret. Then will I also confess unto thee that thine own right hand can save thee. Now, if Job could adorn himself with majesty and glory and beauty as God does, just look around at our earth, our world. It's such a beautiful place. And it represents the majesty and the glory and the beauty that God is. It's God's creation. It's a manifestation of his own glory. But he said, if you can do that, Job, then you can act like God and you can execute justice. Job could then seek out all of the proud people, and by proud it meant those who willfully lived in sin. And Job could not only seek them out, but he could react to them appropriately. He would have the authority to embarrass them, it said humiliate, and eliminate their offensive conduct. If Job could and would execute irreversible judgment against all the wicked people on earth, then God would be willing to recognize him as his equal, and Job would be able to use his own right hand, the hand that represented power, to save himself. And Job was neither authorized nor capable of fulfilling this list given by God. He could not adorn himself with majesty and excellency. He couldn't do these things. And the truth for Job and for us is that we cannot save ourselves. Job couldn't save himself out of the situation that he was in, and we can't save ourselves out of a death that leads us to an eternal hell. But we have the sacrifice of Jesus to thank that we can have salvation, because we can't do it ourselves. Now, Job may not have been given a reason for his suffering. If he had been given by God, he probably couldn't have understood it. But now we know without a doubt why Jesus suffered. And for no other reason than that, we need to believe that God is at work in every circumstance of our life when we don't understand the situations and we don't understand his plan. Just like Job realized, we can't begin to compare our wisdom and our power with God. And we should be thankful in our prayers that God does know the challenges of our lives and the weaknesses and for every situation that we face every day. And we need to ask for faith to trust in his plan in all circumstances. I want to thank you for joining in today. I hope you'll have a great week and you'll join in again next time.